I think we're live.
Yeah.
Hi, Amelia. Hi, Katja. We're live and on air.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, everyone. Let's. It's always like as you start, there's a sort of a moment of like, are we live? And then do we start talking? So let's introduce ourselves, and I'll start so that more people will join by the time, because they know it's my channel. So, but I'm Ros of Scully Daniel About the Books, and one of the hosts of Reading the Globe, the contemporary strand of the year-long kind of global literature read-along, and my co-host for that strand all the way through and hosting the whole of Reading the Globe is Katja. So, and then we've got a special guest today. So I'll pass to you next, Katja.
Okay, yeah, so like Ros said, Katja from Page Turners with Katja, and I host this contemporary strand, the YA and the classics, and focus on translated fiction, but I'm an eclectic reader, and I will pass to Amelia to introduce herself.
Yeah, hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I feel very honored to be on your channels. I don't have a channel on my own. Amelia reads on BookTube, but I think I started following BookTube maybe 12 years ago now. And yeah, I'm subscribed to a lot of channels, but I'm not active. I don't have a channel on my own. I have a Bookstagram, a small, very small Bookstagram, only for my own pleasure. Yeah, I'm looking forward to talk with you about The Director, which is not the German title, but yeah, it's not the translation of the German title, but yeah.
So I'll just very quickly jump in because I was thinking, Amelia, we already knew from before the whole Reading the Globe project, but our interactions have really increased because we've got the Discord for Reading the Globe, and that's been a really handy way of sort of like connecting with other people who are taking part in the project. So hi, Angelia.
And so Amelia's, been one of our like participants with loads to sort of say and lots of thoughts about books, and I think you often have a slightly different take on books from me. So that's one of the stimulating things about the Discord group. It's a very sort of open and fluid discussion. But also we especially invited Amelia to be our guest today because we're reading a German book by a German author, and it just felt, like we should call on our in-house expert.
Oh my God, that's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of pressure. Speaking for all the Germans there, yeah. So,
only teasing, but you know what I mean. So
yeah,
because the book that we're talking about is The Director, and the author is, I think he has dual nationality, Austrian and German.
Yes, he has. Yeah.
And so, written in German. I read the English translation, really good translation by Benjamin Ros. And it was a book that the translation came out this year. So it's a kind of bit of a hot new book, which is always fun. And Katja, you also read the English translation, didn't you?
I did and didn't, because I went with the audiobook and I can't remember who the narrator was, but they were really good. So I'll look that up.
Yeah. And Amelia, you read the original. So give us the German title.
The German title is Lichtspiel, which is a very old-fashioned word for a movie, a film, and it is not used anymore nowadays, really. There are, small cinemas in Germany, and they call themselves Lichtspielhaus, which means movie house. So they sometimes still use that word. And I found it actually really interesting, the title, Lichtspiel. So the translation is playing with light, playing with shadows. So that's actually what the word means. So it's like you are seeing shadows on a screen. So that's an expression, a kind of expression, like I said, an old-fashioned expression for a movie, a film. And for the topic of the book, that someone struggles with, how to make art in times like the Third Reich, I found this actually a very, very good title, not only because of the time, it fits the time that the book takes place, but also because of this, underlying meaning you could give to this title. So yeah. I found that very interesting.
It's got a lot more resonance than the English title, The Director. But I guess there wasn't a
no. You can't translate that really. Yeah,
it was one of those untranslatable things. So
yeah,
that we lost. Hi, Constance. So we usually kind of give a little idea of what the book is or what it's about. We haven't agreed which of us will do that. Shall I do that? Is that okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
As Amelia said, it's connected with the movies, and absolutely, because it's kind of historical fiction, but a sort of slightly unusual, slightly twisted version, I guess, because it's an imaginative retelling of the life of, well, I'd call him G.W. Pabst. Amelia, yeah, give it in German.
G.W. Pabst, we would say.
Yeah, you'd say, but he was generally went by his initials, and he was a film director. He was a film director in the silent era, so famously made films that were sort of launched Greta Garbo's career, Louise Brooks's career. Did amazing film of Brecht's Strip in the Opera with Lotte Lenya in it, so real kind of like the birth of German cinema. He was one of the big three, I guess, directors, filmmakers. And then he in the mid-30s, he goes to Hollywood, doesn't make it in Hollywood. Things don't go well for him. He goes back to France. He goes to Austria to visit his sick mother, and basically, the timing is bad. Or, well, we should come back to this in terms of plot. To what extent he knew what he was doing when he went back to Austria, because he ends up stuck there, but also he is able to make films again in a way that he couldn't in Hollywood. So a lot of interesting kind of like questions, I guess, about his choices. And he makes 3 films during under the Third Reich, 2 of which we have, 1 of which is lost, and that's kind of one of the plot points, I guess. And then he does carry on making films afterwards, but his reputation, I guess, was affected by the fact that he'd made films they were not propaganda films. I think it's important to say that, but nevertheless, there's issues around complicity. And Kehlmann takes that story and then runs with it in his own unique way.
Yep. Is
that a fair summary?
It is a fair summary. And talking about him sort of like being this pioneering person, I thought it was really interesting to start the book with 2 of the stars that he sort of discovered. So that's Greta Garbo and Louise Brooks. And so I'm not going to do spoilers, but I'll say very randomly, as he had first the interaction with Greta Garbo, who is very much she just wants to be left in peace, and Louise Brooks, who is very much portrayed very much like a vixen, like this very seductive character. I thought to myself, this I guess it's a 1980s song came to mind. That song, you were working as a waitress in a cocktail bar when I first met you.
Human League.
I discovered you ladies, and they're like, talk to the hand. Without going into too much detail. And I thought, well, that's a really random association I've got there, but I like the way that Kehlmann set that up, because it really got me looking into the 2 characters as well.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
He makes really interesting use through the whole book of like real characters, and the majority of the characters in the book did really exist, but not all of them. And you're constantly, you know, a little bit uncertain about that, aren't you?
Yeah. For me, I actually was quite familiar with a lot of the names. Some names I wasn't sure that these are real, or these have been real life characters, and some of them haven't been, and some of them I actually had never heard of. So, but a lot of them, the names were familiar to me. So, especially with regard to actors and actresses, because they were very big names, you know, in the German film history. So, and that's probably already one of the problems I had with the book, because I thought that he was overdoing it a bit. So there was such an enormous cast of characters, and some of them were only like, you know, he is for sure, he's a great writer. So there were some passages in the book that are really quotable, I think. And he's also a really good storyteller, in my opinion. But I thought sometimes he neglected that a little bit in favor of the name dropping. And so because, and that for me, I lost interest at some point in the book when some other famous character showed up. I was like, yeah, okay, I get it, you know, so these have been famous too. And then this actor, you know, wasn't allowed to do that, or this actor, you know, actually joined the NSDAP, or you know, and I was like, but it didn't add a lot to the story. If there were characters that didn't really play a role for the story, then I thought, well, I really don't need to know that. And for me, one of the main situations I had an issue with was when they were in France. And there were a lot of people meeting, a lot of famous people meeting. And it was only a passage like they were talking about, what are we going to do? Where are we going to go next? We can't stay in France. What, you know, they were talking about their plans and things. And then it was only mentioned what happened to them, you know, after they had left. Some didn't survive, some, you know, ended up in a concentration camp and things like that. But I thought, well, this didn't really add something to this story for me. You know, of course, it's important, but, you know, there were like, it was more like on a theater stage, these characters showed up and then they went away, and you never ever saw them again, you know. So
well, I think that's really interesting, because I observed the same thing very much so. But for me, what how I saw it was that it was like you said, like a theatre stage, but I saw it like a film. And so, you know, it's like we got these little scenes dropped in, like there's a scene in a Hollywood party, or the scene in that cafe in Paris, I think it was, you know, that like they were very, like, I didn't linger on them, but they were quite visual in a way. And it's like, oh, it's almost like you bring in all these sort of bit part players. And I wasn't, perhaps because I was seeing it a bit in that sort of cinematographic sort of way, I wasn't necessarily expecting them to hang around and to get a lot more about them. So I sort of saw the problem that you were seeing, and then I kind of reframed it, I suppose. So it worked for me. I'm just going to pick up Constance's comment.
That's very interesting. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah.
Yeah, I was okay with the characters coming in and out, and especially at the start because we started in Hollywood. He had some offers, but they were all quite limiting offers in terms of what he felt he could do creatively. And I thought that was set up really nicely because we have the main characters that he's interacting with for American TV that are brief, but it really highlights the difference between their offer and the offer of the guy from the propaganda ministry who says, oh, you don't have to do propaganda videos, you can do whatever you like. And he's like, no, sort of like shuts him down. And then, without spoiling it, how things develop later in the story. And I thought that provided a really good contrast. And you'd mentioned that with that gathering in France, that it kind of felt like, enter sort of like stage left, exit. And I felt that as well. But I felt again that it added because it kind of feels like some of the old 1930s movies. I don't know. I can't think of one now because initially I was like, oh, maybe Casablanca, but I don't think they had that many instances of that. But it reminds me of quite a few black and white movies where you'd have a sort of like ensemble cast, and they weren't always present in a very substantial role.
Yeah, for me, if I am allowed to add one more thing to that discussion, a big thing for Pabst actually with his in his movies or with his movies was continuity. Is that how you pronounce it?
Continuity. Yeah.
Continuity. Thank you. And where is the continuity in that? That is not. So I was like, this would have never happened if Pabst would have been the director of that movie.
Yeah,
so
true.
That's
it's like
really
the opposite, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think the book is like the opposite because it's quite fragmented. Even the opening.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
And and I didn't like that much, I have to say. So because I had some grievances with that. I have to admit it was a bit much, and it was a bit like, oh, I did my research, and now on all these names, I have a list of names, and they all have to show up in this book. And that was a bit much to me. And also, and I have to say that has to do with that I'm German, I think. So I think I am in general that I probably didn't enjoy the book as much as, someone from anywhere else in the world. Is that I saw a lot of things coming, and I was like, oh, please don't bring up that name. Please don't bring up that name. And he did. So, and I was like, oh no. And then he just brought it up for, a passage or two, and then he went away from it. And I was like, oh no, this was unnecessary, because I've read a lot of, and other people from other countries have as well, I'm sure, but I have a lot of books about the Third Reich and the Nazis and Second World War, of course. And there were a lot of things in this book I saw coming. I saw coming that he is going to mention it. And I was hoping sometimes that he would do it a little bit different and not like it has been done so many times before. And unfortunately, on that level, he disappointed me a little bit. So
that's so interesting then, that like the experience for me, I mean, not that I don't know about the Third Reich. I mean, I studied history. I do, but I didn't have that experience as an English reader. So is this one of those books that actually the translation is almost more satisfying than the original? Who knows? Angelia says she didn't warm to the book and it had to go back, but she does say she's meaning to try again when she's in the right frame of mind. And Constance was just suggesting the Grand Hotel as the kind of sort of how would you say, ensemble sort of piece. So we haven't really said, have we? We've got an idea from you, Amelia, but we haven't really said whether we enjoyed the book or not, and likewise anyone in the chat. So I think we could be on like an ascending scale. maybe. So you had some quite strong disappointments about it, as you said, Amelia. Katja, are you kind of like in a
I'm
middle
sort of in
place?
the middle because I read an article by The Guardian which said this is probably one of his best pieces. And I thought I really liked it, but I actually don't prefer it to Till, which is the one that I read a couple of years ago. And I was very invested in the start. And then I sort of like tapered off, which was fine because I still had enough interest to carry me along to the end.
Mm-hmm.
And that was fine. So I found it a likable, like not likable, but an enjoyable book. And I even enjoyed that he was purposely sort of like droll in certain places. So, yeah.
Yeah. And then sort of coming to me, I think, on our ascending scale, I really liked it a lot. I mean, I think I did slightly prefer Till, but that was because it's set in the 30 Years' War. And, that's like, Marmite for me or something, I mean, in that I just, it was lovely to get a book set in that period because you don't much. But the sort of fragmented style is something that particularly appeals to me, I think. So it was quite a Ros book in that sense. But I might have had your reaction, Amelia, if I'd been sort of even more familiar with the people and events than I was. But I really enjoyed that jumping around a lot.
There's a comment by Angelia, which I think is really timely because that also puts into context like the importance of where we are at a point. And I mean, if I was where you are, Angelia, if I was sorry to say, but if I was in the US at the moment, I was talking to someone I know and they were saying, do you know what, the politics here and what's happening at the moment is just so depressing. And I know that worldwide, we're going through such shifts and it is like quite a depressing time. But I think it would hit even harder for me if I was in your place, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Books about fascism hit hard for me anyway, all the time, because, I don't have to get into that. But yeah, it is. I think I would give it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I think still, because it was not like that I was, so disappointed by the book, but, because he's such a good writer. So I have read a couple of books by him, I haven't read Till, I have to admit, because that's not really what I'm interested in. Also, there is, I'm quite familiar with the folklore of Till Eulenspiegel, and I wasn't that interested in what he is going to make out of that, but out of that tale. But he's a good writer, and he writes not only novels, he writes plays, he writes screenplays, he writes short stories. He writes literary criticism. So he's a very, very prolific writer. He is. And so maybe that's why my expectations are so high. And interestingly, I looked up because I was quite sure that because he is so, his books are always bestsellers, and the one that made him the most famous was, I think, the one about was Measuring the World. I think it is.
About Humboldt. I really
about
want
Humboldt.
That's
and
one I most want to read, I think.
Yeah. And I read that back in the day when it was published, and I think it was published in, I don't know, 2006, maybe, so a long time ago. And I really enjoyed it back then. I don't know, but I haven't reread it since then. And I also, I think, quite enjoyed it because I'm very interested in von Humboldt and also Gauss, the mathematician. So I still think that's the book I liked by him the most. But yeah, I had there were some things maybe my expectations were just a little bit too high. And also I had a feeling he did some things he should know better. because he's Austrian German. And I don't want to spoil anything, but I think this book is a very good discussion about what decisions you have to make or you are willing to make in a situation like the one Pabst found himself in. And but and also it is mentioned at a certain point later in the book, it is mentioned that people who stayed and did some propaganda movies or did other things for the Nazis or with the Nazis or even stayed in the country when they could probably have fled. The same discussion we had in Germany about the people who went away, because some people thought, well, why didn't they stay and try to fight? So and this is a very interesting discussion in this book, but I thought that it is a topic in the book, but he didn't really dive into that that topic. And then he mentioned, and I don't want to spoil anything, but he mentions Heinz Rühmann, the actor, at some point, and he also mentions Erich Kästner, the writer, at some point. Both made some very, very different decisions during the Nazi regime. And it was just, there was a sentence or two about Heinz Rühmann, and then there was a sentence or two about Erich Kästner, and that was it. So I would have preferred that he would have left them out of the book if he has nothing more to say about it. That was my experience.
I thought it was really interesting. I'd read when I read about Pabst, sort of to make sense of who this was about, because I'm not a big filmy person, so I kind of vaguely heard of him, but wanted to know more. And there was this sort of implication that it was kind of like an unlucky accident that he was back in Austria, because his mother was ill and got stuck, as it were. And then reading more and also listening to Kehlmann talk about the book, the implication is actually he must have known. He must have had some contact that that said, he was read Pabst. It was in theory risky for him. He was seen as being that kind of left wing. It would have been risky for him to come back. So he'd had the nod that he wouldn't, he would be welcomed or given the opportunity to work. And Kehlmann writes that into the story, but he writes it into the story because he thinks there's no way that he would have risked going back to Austria if he hadn't had a sort of like, oh, you'll be, we'll make it okay for you if you do, which was sort of interesting to me, that the idea that he had some idea of what he was almost like walking into. But also it's that I think it's really good for all of us to think about what we would or wouldn't do in any situation, and that process of compromise, thinking no, I wouldn't, no, oh well, maybe I might, oh well, I'll say I'm going to do it, and then I'll delay and I'll get away, and it's it's the frog in the pan of cold water that's heating up, that you get sort of caught up in something. And when is the other thing that I had read was that he could probably have left to Switzerland. That was probably open to him initially, and he doesn't. So that feeling of making choices almost by default. Oh, I've got to go back because my mother's ill. Oh, I can't leave to Switzerland because it's too tricky. I'll have to leave too much. But I can't. Oh well, I've got to talk to Goebbels. I haven't got a choice, but I can actually weasel out. Oh no, I've got to start it. Oh no, now I'm making the film. that how that happens, and the feeling of like, well, actually, what would we do? It's a really useful thing and it's very, very relevant to what's happening in America currently, isn't it? So I can see why Angelia,
I thought the wife was a good sort of foil in order to highlight that, because as the book progresses, she more and more is direct to him about having her suspicions that it was an intentional move rather than, oh, oops, we ended up like this. Obviously, I've got questions about the ladder, the ladder incident, but weirdly, those sort of incidents didn't stick in my mind as much. I think I was meant to be really aware of the twins and really aware of the father, which I sort of was, but I thought the more subtle things were of interest. So, for example, the son's progress through school, because he was very much aware of acting a role at the start. And then towards a certain point, because he's acted that role for so long, he becomes that person. And I thought, again, the wife or the mother was a really good way of highlighting the changes in both her husband and her son, sort of like that awareness where they perhaps were less aware.
It was interesting. Kehlmann said that, two things. He made the son a fictional figure because the real life son only died quite recently. Their surviving relatives, so he was sensitively making sure that the son in the book was explicitly a made up character. But the other thing he said was that a lot of the experiences that the son talks about, he took from his own father's experiences at school at that time. The violence and the teachers being like just letting positively encouraging the children to fight and so on. That was all from his father's record. I mean, his father subsequently ends up in a concentration camp, so but does survive the war. But that when I heard that, it was like, oh wow, I thought, was this exaggerated? No, this was his father's experiences. Yeah.
I think I would never, you can never say how you would have decided back then, that I would never be that bold, so because you would never know. But for me, I think the way Pabst is described in his book, it didn't happen to him, it's not, and he put his art over everything else. So he was actually quite selfish, and I thought this was actually very, very skillfully described by Kehlmann, the way when Pabst, talked to other people, so the actors, in his movies, and they didn't do what he wanted them to do. And it is that there are a lot of passages actually in the book where Pabst has a way of talking to people so that he achieves what he wants to achieve with them. And you could call that manipulative, actually, because he's very good in doing that. And so he does everything to reach his personal goals, while pitting himself if it doesn't go his way, and if something happens that comes in the way to his art. So, and he puts art over everything. And there's a quote I wrote down. Of course I have to translate it into English, so I'm not sure that it is actually word by word what it says in the English translation, but I think he says that to Wilczek. Without us, everything would be the same. No one would be saved. No one would be better off. But the film would not exist. And that's, for me, that's him. That's what he worried about. He always worried about art first. That was, he didn't worry that much about his wife. He didn't worry that much about his son, really. So that it was all about the art. And of course you could criticize. I'm not saying that he should have said no to the Nazis, but he could have said, oh, for heaven's sake, I'm doing some, I don't know. And he thought about that, doing some, low key films, some trash movies, not necessarily propaganda movies, but some low-key movies, to save his life, but not, but he was more interested in doing a great movie, so that's it. I can't really say that I liked him that much,
Yeah.
so
No.
Do
Yeah.
you think that the wife perhaps would have been the one to thrive if they had stayed in the States? Because at the
Yeah.
start, there's a point with the movie premiere where someone compliments her on her English language, and they said, "Have you considered translating? Like translation work?" And she only looks at the husband, and initially I thought she was looking to him like, oh, well, he's never been interested in really learning from me. But I kind of feel, like when I got to the end of the book, I was like, was he more of a hindrance than him just refusing to learn from her? So I don't know how you both felt about, like who would have been able to thrive if they had and who wouldn't have,
Well, I don't know. But of course, her English was a lot better than his. But I don't know, because of the times, if she would have got the chance, so to really be thriving. But that actually leads me to the end of the book, and I don't want to spoil that. But there's a third part of the book, and I found, apart from the solution with Wilczek, that there was a setup right at the start of the book, and then at the end, Wilczek in the elderly home, and then there's something is revealed that hasn't really been a surprise to me. I was sure that this is going to happen, but apart from that, there are two other things done at the end. One has to do with the wife, and one has to do with the son. And I found both completely unnecessary. Because I thought, what is this? Because I didn't think that it added something to the story. On the contrary. So
I think because of spoilers, we can't really talk about it though. So
no. So
yeah. I was just going to pick up on a comment from Angelia. About the theme of staying or leaving and the novella Address Unknown. And I haven't read it. I don't know. Have either of you read it? It's by Catherine Taylor, but it's about some, as I understand it, it's about a couple of friends who are, they're German, and it's sort of set in the early 30s, and it is about their conversations about leaving, staying. Yeah. So, but I don't know it. Neither of you two do. Yeah.
No, I don't. But just talking about it put me in mind of something else in the book, which isn't about address unknown, but the unknown of the person in front of you, because there's discussion that after, like the war, when it's all over and the dust is starting to settle, that people realize they didn't know each other as well as they thought. And how he mentions a couple of characters who, for example, came across as very much towing the party line, but had hidden people and made sure that people got out safely and everything, and all of this information coming to light.
Yeah. Which is also a trope of this kind of literature, actually.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
So I do have a question. Is Hans Conrad a real person? Hans Conrad, right at the start, is he a real person, that presenter who was very charismatic on camera, and then the moment they were off camera, he was really vile? He's stuck in my mind.
We need an American to tell us. Oh no,
it was in Germany.
No, it's Austria. No, it's in Austria. It's in Austria.
I was thinking about the bits. No, it was in Austria. Yes, is he real?
With
is it a real
at the start, where he goes for his interview, and the guy is all charismatic on camera, and then they go off camera, and then he's like ranting at all of the staff.
Yeah, because he is shouting, not shouting, but he is confronting Wilczek after the interview ended. And so he is obviously from Austria, because he is talking, he's cursing, and he is, he's very rude towards Wilczek in Austrian German. So that, it's very obvious that she's, they are in Vienna, they are, it's the Austrian.
That didn't come across to me, listening to it sort of narrated in English. When the difference between Austrian German and German German was coming across is when they go back to Austria and they're in the mansion, and they mention that the caretaker has got this very strong accent. That's the first time I became really aware of the differences.
Yeah, but that's actually, that he's talking in a dialect, and that's something. And
it's not an accent,
different.
It's a dialect.
That's not an accent. And also, when I talk about Austrian German and German German, there are some expressions Austrian people use, even in High Austrian, and I wouldn't use in Germany, or they are used. We are talking the same language, of course, but we are using it differently sometimes. So some expressions I would never use, they use, and the other way around, or not the way a sentence is built. That. But what Jarzabek is talking, that's actually dialect. So because of the region he's living in, so even people from other parts of Austria might have some difficulties to understand him. So the Heinz Conrad situation, it was like a change of character within one sentence. He was this very sophisticated TV host, and very popular, and as soon as he talked to Wilczek in private, he was very rude, and and the way the sentence was phrased added to that rudeness. So that was very interesting.
So even though dialect and accent didn't really translate as much into the English language, I can tell you that he came across extremely rude in the English version. I was like, this guy, he just flipped.
Well done, translator. Well done. Yeah.
It's a good translation, I think.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you if you have any particular favorite scenes or memorable scenes that stuck in your mind from the book, and likewise anyone commenting in the chat. I think I've got two, but I won't. I'll get you to talk about, or should I talk about one to give you a chance to think? So possibly one of my favorite scenes in the book was the book club.
That's one of mine.
Yeah,
mine is the book club and the toilet paper.
The book club said, so it's this and we all have those uncomfortable book clubs where it's like, do you know who liked the book, who didn't like the book, and are you actually having social rivalry, or rather than really talking about a book? But this is sort of taken to another level, because there's all these unspoken rules that you might get wrong, like who you're allowed, who's in and who's out, and who you're allowed to talk about, and so that was a really effective scene for me. I liked a lot. So Katja, what was your other favorite then?
Well, I will start with the book club, because I had a look at my notes in Discord, and I was like, this is like a great satire of all of these officials at this wives book club, and how they've got these codes of conduct, and they have to read the most bland literature, because that's the literature that is approved, and then they have to say how much they loved it. And if you then have a different opinion, we immediately saw someone being corrected. So I thought that was a really effective tool. But the other one is a far less memorable for its meaningfulness, because I think the book club is meaningful and it makes you think about the wider context of stuff. But I liked the whole feel of the fragmented start, which really pulled me in, because you've got a narrator who is struggling with some form of dementia. And what I thought was interesting is how he, like he goes to use the toilet before going on a set and then after. And each time the same thing happens, but to him it's a fresh happening. And that's the escapist toilet roll. So at the start, he goes to grab the toilet roll and it takes off underneath the stalls. And it happened again later. And I was like, oh. So I just kind of felt for him.
Yeah. What about you, Amelia? Do you have a memorable
Yeah,
scene?
for me, actually, I liked all the scenes with Trude, so the wife.
Yeah.
Because I found her such an interesting character, and I would have liked more, about her. Because also I liked that she was very reflective, and Pabst didn't come across as very self-reflective to me, and also and in the same vein is Wilczek, because Wilczek was also a lot more self-reflective, and so all the in every passages with Trude, either Trude or Wilczek, I really liked, because because I wanted to shout at Pabst a lot. and and I was I wanted more from her, definitely, because she was such the same actually, but this would have been a completely different book. I was of course familiar with Greta Garbo, but I was not really familiar with Louise Brooks.
Yeah.
And I was more familiar with the German stars, the film stars. So I found her. I want to read a book about her. Oh my God, she was, she was very interesting. So yeah.
The other almost like type of scene that really stuck in my mind and I found quite interesting was the ones where it stops being realistic and it actually becomes quite cinematic, but like a kind of a really weird Carter. So like when the sun goes down into the cellar and it turns almost into this kind of horror movie kind of, endless passages and, and people appearing and then disappearing. And likewise, there's a couple of the scenes when they're running with the reels of film quite late in the book, and it's sort of impossible and speeded up and slowed down and cut in strange ways. And I really I enjoyed the scenes that had that kind of quality, I suppose. Made it a bit different,
Yeah, I appreciated it. I don't know if I loved it, but I appreciated it. And it also sort of like, again, sort of created this counterpoint for me that the two people that I found who had, well, there's more, but two people who had little self-awareness are the son, because, it's a slow progression, and Pabst himself. And they're the ones that have those experiences more. And Trude doesn't until sort of like the end with her husband, sort of like when they're down in the cave system. But otherwise, I found her more reliable within a context of, this fragmented cinematic sort of environment. She was almost the most straightforward person to follow.
I also liked there were some, like I said before, there were some sentences that I found really quotable, and there were some things that had some really great nuances to them. So some writing that had some really great nuances, and I wanted more of that, because I know Kehlmann can do that. And I think it was Pabst himself who said once how it must be to be God or an archangel and to constantly feel the ascending prayers. Each can be fulfilled on its own, but since there are too many, all of them remain unmet. And that is, because of the whole situation, with with the Nazis and what Pavs has been confronted with, and all the other people as well. But I found that really, and there were some moments that said a lot without, being on the nose or, into your face. So, but it made you think, and it gave you, it also, it reached me on an emotional level, because it made me think, and it made me, you see the bigger picture, and the main themes of the book, the main themes were brought closer to me as a reader, and so so and I liked that. I have a couple of quotes. I probably put them on Discord, and so and that's when I thought, well, yeah, he's a good writer, and he he's he knows what he's doing. Yeah.
So talking about quotes, you had mentioned when he about the art being the most important thing to him, and there is a conversation with his wife about the art remains, and she asks that context question, but does it remain or is it soiled, sort of thing. And I think that was a focus a lot on the end. And again, that conversation that you highlighted, Amelia, about the question of, the people who stayed and who went, and how people are judged for how they continued within society if they stayed.
Yeah.
And one thing that I hadn't really thought about, I suppose, until I read the book, but which comes out in the book, is that, like if you were a writer, say, you could be, I don't know, you could write a few things to keep yourself in with the regime, but you could perhaps be also doing your own work and having your own thoughts and having things ready, that you get to publish later, or you or if you're a film director, it's all or nothing. Like you can't make a film without lots of money and lots of people and access to equipment and studios. So it's like you couldn't take a halfway position almost, so and I hadn't really considered that as I don't know, the differences between different art forms and producing art under a dictatorship, whatever that dictate, can you ever produce great art under a dictatorship, or possibly only in opposition to it? It's almost like it sort of almost naturally devalues what you do, if it's I'm not expressing that very well. Do you know what I mean?
No, but yeah, exactly. And I think that's actually a passage in which Erich Kästner is mentioned as well, again, because that's what he did. He was a writer, and he wrote things under a different name. So and that was, there was a lot of discussion about him after the war as well, because he stayed. And interestingly, he always said he stayed because of his mother. So there's there's actually something similar going on here, and it differently, what they did and what they didn't do. And so but there's, you can also see this book as a starting point for a more broader discussion. And I'm really aware of that. An author, if you have a difficult topic like this, you can't do it all, but for me, I would have wished that, in favor of less name dropping, he would have dived into other things a little bit more, so.
I'm just going to flash this up from Constance, because the book that you want.
Oh, okay. I will look it up. Yeah.
So we can look for that one. And I think Angelia says that she read that. Too. So interesting. We should work towards winding up, because we're coming up to the end of an hour, and because a few people usually join us, but also other people kind of watch it later. And you don't want to watch something that's more than an hour long, do you? So, any last thoughts about this book before we sort of wind up and look ahead to next month?
One last thought, because as we were talking, I thought, well, actually, another memorable scene, but I don't mention it because it does feel that it has come up in other works, is when they're having their dinner party and someone gets taken away, and they sort of like, there's this awkward pause, but they almost continue afterwards. So, and I think that's been done quite often, but I thought that was memorable.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah,
That's true. Yeah.
Any last thoughts from you, Amelia?
Well, yeah, I would still recommend reading more Daniel Kehlmann. And if you haven't read Measuring the World, I would probably start there, because it might be, it's an interesting topic, and it's also interesting real life characters, but he made up some things as well in that book. And and then if you like it, I would say go from there. I think almost all of his novels are translated into English. Yes. I think, yeah.
Or certainly since Measuring Time, I think everything.
That's true.
Been translated. Yeah. I'm just going to pick up on another comment here about a documentary about Leni Riefenstahl, and
terrible person.
So I do have a question, less about the comment, although the comment is really good. But is that a combination of Korean and Japanese, neither of which I can read, but I'm tempted to say that I recognize the languages?
Yeah.
Who knows? But yeah.
There's probably one more thing I can say about Daniel Kehlmann that I found out in preparation of this conversation. I thought I was very sure that he had won the German Book Prize, but he never did. He's such a successful author, but he was longlisted once and shortlisted once, but he has never won. And that surprised me, because in my mind, I thought, well, for sure he has won at least once, but he didn't. He never did. He has won a lot of other prizes, so he can be happy. Be happy.
Yeah. And Chris has answered you.
Oh,
you're right.
Yeah. I got the languages, but I had no idea what it said. So that's your name.
So cool. For much. So before we go, I'm just going to remind us about next month. So next month we're reading, those of us that choose to, Ido's Souls by Stella Gaetano. Translated from the Arabic. Translator's name's gone out of my head for this minute. But it's a book from South Sudan by a woman author from South Sudan. Wrote it interestingly in Arabic, although the number one language of sort of shared language in South Sudan is actually English. And that's about the sort of different colonial history of Sudan and South Sudan. And it's 3 generations and the Sudanese civil war, and then the sort of creation of South Sudan as a separate state. And I'm really looking forward to it. I always like reading, particularly women's voices from parts of the world that I don't know so well. So that's why I'd say so fingers crossed for a good one, and that people will be able to join us.
I had a quick look. It's translated by Sawad Hussein.
That's it. Sawad Hussein. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ros.
Yeah. So thank you. And a huge thank you to you, Amelia, for venturing out from behind the avatar on Discord to because your perspective added a lot for us, I think. Yeah.
Thank you very much for having me. I feel very special, I have to say. And I'm very sorry for everyone who expected another author or translator today. I'm very sorry. So It's only me.
We're
It's
talking.
only me.
We only did that once, though. We've
Yeah.
only done that once. We want to do more, but we love having people from the Discord, like people who are taking part. Don't even have to be on Discord. Anyone taking part in the project, and you've been contributing so much to all the book discussions. So it's been brilliant, actually. Like Ros
Thank
said,
you very much.
seeing you. Yeah, thank you.
So I'm going to stop being live. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.